Hey, what is going on, everyone? This is Dorrani, James, and Sherif from VG247. We have been playing Dying Light 2. We've been playing Dying Light 2. It releases on the 4th of February on all systems. Firstly, boys, how are you?
Not bad.
Yeah, doing well, thank you.
Good. So a bit of housekeeping, just so there's a bit of clarity for the listeners. Who has completed this game so far?
I have completed this game. I've done the due diligence and completed this game for you, Dorrani.
Thank you so much. Sherif, and you?
I'm about halfway through.
Halfway through. I don't know where I am because they're saying 500 hours, so I'm just like, I haven't played nowhere near 500 hours, but no, in the main story, I think I got the glider. If anyone wants to use that, the glider's been
less
shown.
Than halfway.
Yeah, just less than halfway, but it's fine. I think James is going to be doing the majority of the speaking in this conversation. Also, the footage you're watching is captured on PC in 1440p. It is on just under the highest settings. I can put the settings on screen for you as well. So let's get started. First question. Should people buy Dying Light 2?
I don't know. Maybe. I know that's a bit of a terrible answer, but it's kind of like a difficult game to recommend. I think really, when you get down to it, it has a lot of really mainstream appeal. I think it's also one that occupies a bit of a weird space in the market because it's one of those mid-tier games, and it kind of feels like it's trying too hard to justify its kind of existence in the wider gaming space, especially when it's brushing up against the kind of first-party stuff like Horizon coming a couple of weeks later, and it's not. Techland obviously has how many, like probably triple-digit employees at this point, so it's not really fair to call it a true indie in that sense either. But it just feels like if you've seen any of the marketing, if you've seen any of the pre-release trailers and all of that stuff, it feels like the game is leaning on a lot of the stuff that it's weakest at for some reason. You mentioned it in the intro there, Dorrani. The thing about 500 hours is just baffling. I don't even know why they've put that out there. It is categorically not that long. There's the Rosario Dawson's in it, who's been good in games before, but the Hollywood performances aspect of it is also one of the places that it's a little bit weak. And the kind of aspect of choice, you making decisions in the story, that's not one of the best aspects of it either. So what's really good about it is the kind of jumping around and the kind of more nuanced parts of the story. But if you're talking about whether you want to buy it, it's more whether a question of whether you like kind of popcorn games or not, because it's definitely one of those.
So it caters to everyone, basically, which I can see. I can agree with that. It's definitely like if you're not into games, I always say this quite often, like people who only buy 1 or 2 games a year, maybe the 500 hours will work for them so they can get a lot of their money's worth and spend a lot of time like looking in all of the nooks and crannies. But it's quite simple in its open worldness and its activities. It's coming out in the same month as 2 other open world games. You only mentioned one, but it's coming out the same month as Horizon and Elden Ring, which are both in the same genre, you could say, of just open world games, open world RPG. That's tough competition. Sherif, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's more in competition with Forbidden West than it is with Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a bit of its own special thing. Like, I don't think anyone looking at this game is going to be like, oh, I don't have to, what am I going to spend my money on? I don't think anyone is in that situation. I think, definitely it's competing with Horizon Zero Dawn. I have not played Horizon Zero Dawn, but Horizon Zero Dawn to me, Forbidden West looks like a more complete package where there is at least going to be strong narrative, like combat that but better, exploration that but better from being a sequel. Dying Light is mechanically, I think, an improvement in almost every way. It is so fun to play. We couldn't get access to co-op during the preview, but I'm really looking forward to playing it with someone else, because Dying Light 1 was super fun in co-op. So I think if you're in it for the mechanics and you want to just do, like James said, like popcorn game, you want to loot some houses, solve some puzzles, maybe make a couple of risky kind of raids at night, grind a little bit of parkour, do stuff like that as you're talking with your friend or whatever, like, yeah, that game is fun. But if you're expecting like a story or something with the scale that they advertised before, of like, oh, like all these, the city's going to change based on your accents. Yes, it does, but not in a really way, in any way that you think about, like in any of the major, like a Bioware game or something, where it's like, yeah, oh my god, like I need to play this game again to see what happens. Like, no, you're gonna get either water to the city or you're gonna get jump pads. Like, it's, yeah, you're gonna see both of them. So it just really becomes like more of like a, something that you do in the background, and like more of like an excuse to play it again if you're like, oh, I'm gonna join my friend's game who's made a different choice to see what happens. But
Yeah.
it's not really something that you're like dying to know, like, oh my god, like, what, I can't like, this was such a tough choice, like,
Yeah.
not really. But yeah, so I think it's a recommendation if you like something like good mechanics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's important to mention just before we move on that and address something that might annoy a few people. Because we've come right out of the gate and compared it to other games, and that's something
Yeah.
that people get a little bit annoyed about. But I think it's important context with Dying Light 2, because the first game found such success. One, because it was good, but two, because of when it launched in the year. It came out at the end of January, I think, in a long time ago now, like 5, 6, 7 years ago.
2014, I think.
Yeah, so the landscape that Dying Light 2 finds itself in is an important kind of contextual thing, because
Absolutely.
it is something to consider, that it has a more difficult task ahead of it than the first game, and that's just why we're bringing it up.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't want to compare it too much to Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, because I think it's in a similar sort of situation where the first game was released in sort of like a barren early generation kind of thing. Not everyone was quite sure what's going on with new consoles or whatever, and it did a bunch of things okay, but it was something that people bought because there were really no other games to play at that time. And then the second game, even though it's an improvement in almost every way, microtransactions and that stuff aside, no one talks about it, no one remembers it, even though it's like, objectively almost always in every way a better game. And I feel like this game is kind of in a similar situation where, yeah, it is better, it looks, it's bigger, it's better, it looks, feels, but everything about it, like if you were like to put it on like a, like a kind of like a hardware PC kind of comparison, like, yeah, the check marks all the way, but it's also coming out next to Horizon. It's also coming out before Elden Ring, which is like, the landscape is totally different.
Yeah. I do recommend it. I do recommend it. But I will say there is nothing where you're going to be like, oh my, if you've played open world games before, there's nothing that is going to make you say, whoa, this is like a new open world experience. It is just good open world fun. And I'll leave it at that. Next, though, we should speak about like, what were your first impressions? So your first 10 hours, what did you guys think?
Well, I know this is going to sound like I'm throwing some serious shade, but it kind of reminds me of like a game from the heyday of like the PS3.
Okay,
Like,
that's fair.
Because there were tons of great games that came out on the PS3, right? If you told me that this game came out at the same time as like the first Last of Us, the first Tomb Raider, the first Dishonored, like I wouldn't be surprised. It would have more loading screens, it would have like worse draw distance, less dense crowds, all that sort of thing. But it does look in right from the off. I was quite surprised that it has things like, unironically, having towers that you climb to unlock the map and stuff, like proper Far Cry 3 stuff that we were kind of memeing on from 2014 onwards.
Yeah.
And it's quite retro and quite old school in that way. But also in a way, as I mentioned, that has a lot of mainstream appeal, that people kind of like that stuff. So my first impressions of it were that it was a really fun kind of mechanical game, like Sherif says, but at the same time, there are some kind of funky some kind of funky pieces in there. You know what it reminds me of, just coming to my head then? A game that a lot of people really liked, Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
That had some slightly old feeling open world design in there, but people really, really dug it. And so, yeah, it gave me the impression that there are some maybe not so fresh things in here, but I think that people are going to really like this.
Yeah. It's funny because I described it to you, James, as Far Cry with zombies. That was the first thing that came to mind, was this game is Far Cry with zombies because it feels so familiar, which isn't a bad thing because the Far Cry games are not bad games. I think. Sharif, how about you?
Yeah, I don't think it's as bloated as Far Cry or really any Ubisoft game. I also think it's significantly more mechanically compelling than pretty much any game Ubisoft has made in the last 10 years, but that's a different topic. Yeah, I think, it is definitely full of old open world, like open world from 5-6 years ago. They have advanced it since the first game, but it's not to the point where it's like, as James mentioned, like pushing the boundaries or doing anything like that. My very first impression of the game was, oh man, I'm not gonna run this game at max settings ray tracing because it runs like shit. So my very first impression of that was like, I'm gonna take it down. And as soon as I turned off ray tracing at 1440p with the 3080 Ti, I was like, usually above 100 FPS, which is fine, and that's what I'm playing at right now. But generally, for the first 10 hours, I was really like mechanically, it was super fun. Like, I remember enjoying the first game, and this is just significantly improved in almost every area. The dropkick is awesome. The slashing and the slicing, especially as you mod the weapons. There are certain mods that add kind of punch to your weapons. So you just hit them, and the last hit just sends them flying.
Yeah.
The dismemberment is really good because you can, like, if you crouch and the last hit kills someone, their leg is going to cut off and they're going to hold the stump kind of and then they're going to die, which sounds more gruesome than it is, but like in a context of that game is fun. And I just found myself just ignoring the main quest of just running around, just chopping zombies and like looking for stuff. And I think the moment to moment is superb in that game. It really makes a good first impression. And the story, at that time, you're not really clear what's going on, but it's going on and you're invested as much as you can.
Yeah. I think the first couple of hours were actually quite slow. It was quite slow until I got to the first, they're called Gre Contaminated Areas. So there's like two variants of them. One of them is sort of like a dungeon where these Gre things have, they give you, if you collect 3 of them, you can level up your health or your stamina, right? And then in this Gre facility, you get to go down and collect these containers. And then there's like the combat focused one, right? So it's like a little boss in an area, and you just kind of just go in there, defeat the boss. Like a health bar comes up at the top. It's like a let's fight sort of vibe, but they're pretty easy. Until I got to those parts, that's when it started to feel good. And when you're sneaking around, mainly the dungeon-esque one, when you're sneaking around in there when all of the zombies are, doing Sleeping Beauty stuff, like I was like, yeah, this feels really nice. So, but the hours before that, it took a little while because they have to. We'll speak about the narrative in a second, but they have to set up quite a lot. They have to set up quite a lot of characters and make sure it all runs right. But I think that does pay off. But like 5 hours to get things feeling good, and the lack of skills. I don't know why games do this. Yeah, they make you unlock basic things that are just common in other games. Like, for example, sprint is a skill, and I'm just like, what is happening here? Like, when things just feel clunky at the start, and you have to unlock like fluidity, and it just felt super weird. I don't know if you guys felt that way as well. But yeah, they have to set up a lot at the start, bit slow, but it gets good. It gets good. So, disclaimer for the performance. We are playing on test builds, and the day one patch isn't here yet, so your experience may vary. We'll speak about performance more at the end of the video. So Sharif, you said you're a big fan of the first game, right?
Yeah.
What did Dying Light 2 do that was like new to you or new to gaming as a whole?
New to gaming, I think. I don't know if I could have something as major as that. I think it's just more of a refinement of what was there. I don't think there's any other game that does melee combat in that sense in first person at that scale and in an open world setting. I think there are like elements of Fallout here was all the scavenging and rummaging through buildings and boxes and dungeons and stuff. There are elements of Far Cry with the towers and like the openness of the world. But then there's the Dying Light stuff, which is the parkour, which is jumping everywhere and feeling awesome. The melee combat, which is just significantly better than the first game. So I think it's a refinement in that sense. And I'm a fan of as a fan of Dying Light, it's pretty much like everything I wanted for a sequel to have this like expand on what I liked. Except we'll get into the narrative later, but yeah, the narrative is more to me is like the low point. But yeah, it's not a a massive departure. It's just more better, which is totally fine.
Yeah, I've always agreed with that when sequels happen, because people be like, "There's not much change," but I'm like, the game was good before, so we're just slightly tweaking a few pain points, which I think is what you're saying happened here. So new and improved. James, what about you? Is there anything that you thought Dying Light 2 done that pushed the envelope, as they say?
As we've said a few times, it doesn't really do that much new, but I don't think it really needs to. And well, here's my take on it. I think a lot of this was like completely on purpose. We've mentioned that the landscape that Dying Light 2 finds itself in is quite different to the first game. And there is such a high bar to success for this sequel that's kind of spiraled into this huge, so expensively produced game that it can't quite be the same sort of sleeper hit that drops in a quiet period and kind of has a groundswell of success and people buy because they've heard that it's good or whatever. And I think that you can see that in a lot of the design. We've talked about how it leans on a lot of mainstream elements that we see in a lot of different series, and I think you can see that with the story as well. That all this sort of twisty betrayal and warring factions is very kind of 2000s, 2010s kind of post-apocalyptic TV, like it's The Walking Dead or Falling Skies or
Yeah.
or one of these kind of like HBO sci-fi TNT things. I think that's why it doesn't really. I think it's quite safe, is what I think the crux of what I'm trying to get at, and I think that's completely on purpose. But I don't think that it massively suffers because of it, because it has that good mechanical core, and because different elements that it pulls into and those sort of story beats that it leans on, people really like that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it comes together into something that, as we say, doesn't push the envelope, but it hangs together as a decent whole.
That safe comment that you mentioned, I think that's such a good summary of the game. It is incredibly safe. It didn't do anything that would put it in the firing line of criticism. Okay, quickly, let's bullet point these as well. So what you liked and then what you didn't like. So let's do what you liked first. Just bullet point a few things.
Jumping around good. We like jumping around.
Jump good.
Jump good. Need more.
Like,
So
yeah, the open world's like pretty slickly designed, isn't it? So it gives you like a smooth enough run that you can plot your points between where you want to go, and you can feel good doing it, as you mentioned, Dorrani. And yeah, that's one bullet point for you.
Yeah, the parkour is really good. Once you get a sufficient amount of skills to make it feel fluid, the parkour starts to really come together. And you, as you said, the rooftops especially are designed in a way where you can say, I'm gonna jump off this, and then I'm gonna have enough time to make it to that. I'm gonna slide under this. You can see your route ahead of you quite clearly. It's quite easily readable. Yeah, the parkour feels good, man. When you're being chased, for example, if you trigger a howler at night, for example, it feels so good just like knowing that there's a zombie past you, but you're just like 360 backflip gainer, like just doing all sorts of parkour stuff. Agreed. Parkour feels good. Sherif?
Yeah, it is one of the most fun open worlds to traverse. I haven't played, at least. And this is the parkour, and this is the tools that they give you. There's a glider, there's a grappling hook that you get later on in the game, and they kind of space that out fairly well so far, in my experience. I don't know, it seems like you're waiting. It was early on, felt like it was waiting too long to give you like the cool stuff. It was just like, here's the parkour, and then later on, it was like, oh wait, we have this other thing, and then later on, it's like, oh wait, we have this other thing. So yeah, like mechanically, especially in like the movement and like parkouring and all that stuff is superb. And you get like there are two major maps in the game, and they're both completely different in verticality, and so that offers you different ways to kind of play around. It's not just the first game was all of like these kind of traditional European like 4- and 3-story houses, which that's the first map, and then once you get to the second map, things are considerably different, which changes your, like, a lot more wall running, for example. If you don't have that skill, you're going to struggle. The glider comes in handy in there. Like, it's, if you really like moving around in that game, let alone just doing the rest of it, it's so enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that I would like to say that I like, that I don't think many people will like, is the survivor sense and picking up stuff. Just picking up materials and things. It's sort of its own little, you just micromanage it. But of course, the survivor sense You press it, it pings everything around you. It's not on any cooldown. So as you're just moving through the map, that's a button that is you're going to press frequently. And a lot of games do this. A lot of games with crafting and vendors and things where you have to pick up stuff and sell. It's sort of its own, just like little mini game and managing your inventory. I actually quite like that stuff, to be honest. And I like picking up stuff to sell it and getting a profit. I'm a money man, so I like that.
I don't have to worry about weight or encumbrance.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And you just hoover up everything you come across.
Basically that. And you know what? I will say that contributes to a lot of the 500 hours that Techland claim that this game is. A lot of it is you just picking up cigarettes and wires and USB cables and baseball bats and other trinkets. That's where all the 500 hour goes. What else do we like?
Yeah, I think that all three of us will be able to speak to, and I've got a little bit of an inkling about this from what we've touched on throughout this video, that we'll all be able to speak to different parts of the story that we enjoyed more than other parts. I personally liked the kind of warring factions, the internal politics of the survivors versus the peacekeepers narrative. I liked that a lot more than the core storyline of why Aiden has come to Villador or whatever. I enjoyed that more than the relationships with particular characters, let's say, before we go into the things that we didn't like. But yeah, I thought that as I said in in one of the previous segments, I think the kind of golden age of television-esque sort of sci-fi storyline bit where it's everybody's out to get everybody else kind of thing. I thought that was the best executed part of the story, and that's the bit that I liked.
Yeah, I agree. The narrative is good at times. For the most part, I will say about the narrative, the side quests, the objectives that they send you on are a little bit trivial, I'd say. But when you like speak to a quest giver, a side quest giver, like it is full on, like fully voiced. They're giving you a whole lot of lore, a whole lot of backstory to whatever area they're in, and not just the ones who are in like the main hub cities. As you're running through the world in Dying Light 2, you'll often run past people who are just like yelling for help, who are just help me, and oh, you look like my grandson, like sort of Sekiro vibes. I did actually get that quest, and I was quite impressed with how much like narrative depth they have. But okay, hear me out, guys. Yeah, when Techland said this game it has 500 hours of content in it, it subconsciously changed the way I played, because I was running to like a quest, like the main quest, and then off in a distance, because you'll hear people like, help me, and I had to just run past them, because that is sounding an awful lot like 500 hour territory. Like to that quest, it sounded like 500 hours, and I was like, no way, I can't help you.
We should clarify the 500 hours thing is playing the game over and over and seeing the different variations, the choices you make. Obviously, the whole game is like the first run through is not going to take you 500 hours. Just if someone, this is just them saying if you want to see everything and like see every different variation of every decision you've made, which there's a lot you make. Yeah, it's gonna take you 500 hours, but who really?
Well, they said it now. They said it, and now
it's because you can't do manual saves, right? So which is
right.
dumb. Like, why? The only reason to do that is to be annoying. Yeah. But that ridiculous figure that they should never have even mentioned, and has just completely poisoned the discourse around this game, is like when you get two kind of slightly binary paths, if you played the whole game completely over again to choose that second choice because you can't go back and save scum it to choose the different route, and it's just such a disingenuous figure that is just melting my brain why they even decided to do that.
We say that to say that the side quest narrative depth is a point for things that we like. Anything else, guys?
I'm not a fan of the narrative so far. I like that. It's good that you make choices. I'll be interested to see how other things play out, but I'm not generally a fan of the narrative or the production quality around it. But we'll get into the things we don't like soon.
Yeah. To be honest, I do like how the weapons feel. Like how the weapons feel. They do feel quite weighty. When say for example one of your mods, so there's like fire, ice, electric, when they proc and they start going off, like the combat does feel like really good. And the bigger, so are they called variants? What are they called? The bigger monsters. Variants, right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, so the variants, like fighting against those, there's like a big guy with like a sledgehammer sort of vibe and dodging, and how the combat flow feels nice. I think games automatically win a point when they have like bullet time segments like looped into their combat. They automatically win with me, and when that plays into the gameplay, like it slows down time, but it opens up something else when you hit a perfect dodge or perfect counter. I love the flow of combat.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of its most fun aspects. Yeah, like it really goes deep. Like you can block, you can parry, you can perfect dodge, you can perfect parry, you can do this, you can do that. Like even one-on-one, and it's just as you mentioned, like so like the weight you can feel in first person. It doesn't, in my opinion, reach the heights of something like the Torn Banner games, like Chivalry and those games. But it's pretty good. It's pretty fun. Like you could, like I said early on, for me, it was just like I want to play around with this for a while, and I completely ignored everything that the game was telling me to do. I was like, I'm just going to go around, just feel this combo a little bit, and the more you unlock as far as skills, and the more different weapons types you come across, the more it's going to open up, and you go, oh my god, I can do this now, and you can combo stuff into other stuff. Yeah, there's a whole thing going on there.
Yeah. Another thing as well, like I felt like charging your weapon would be like a default thing as well. Nope, you gotta unlock that too. But once you do get that, it does feel pretty good. Yeah, those are my likes, to be honest. Any more?
No.
Well, we've mentioned other things that we've liked in the segments beforehand. So let's just get straight into the nitty gritty of what we don't like. Go on, Sherif, because you said you dislike the narrative, so you got it loaded up.
I just, I don't, I play those games. I play all games like with 100% paying 100% attention. I'm not someone who's like watching TV as they're playing games or whatever, and I just could not care less about any of the things that are going on in the game. I can't really tell you like the reason for that. Like, it's not really that. It's just the story's just. There are factions that they're struggling. I have seen this before. There's nothing really special about him. Oh, they're fighting over water. They're fighting over this. The other aspect of it is that it feels like the troop they got, I guess, for all these characters are from different regions and from different countries. So you'll be talking to someone with like a Southern American accent, and then you turn a corner, and then there's a dude with a British accent. It's like, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah.
And it's like, I understand, like, oh, it's a melting pot. Sure, it's like New York or whatever. Like, you can dismiss it. But it's just, it was always jarring to be like, oh, this person clearly has a Polish accent that's trying to speak English. I can't pinpoint where they're from. And it's like completely taking you out. And then you go back and it's like, oh, this is clearly a perfect American accent because this actor's probably American. It's like where are we? What's going on? The other thing is that they have a lot of names, and they keep bringing up the names and different things like, oh, Barney sent me, or this person sent me, or that person sent me. And I'm like, I find myself like a lot of times thinking, who? What? Did I meet this person? And then the dialogue will like, oh yeah, you met him, and it's like, oh, it's the dude from the metro. Oh yeah, right. The dude was like there for like 20 seconds. Completely forgot his name. Completely forgot his whole thing. But apparently he left me like a very important message that's gonna come up later. And I'm like, oh sure, yeah. Keep going. Voice acting is all over the place for there. I'm pretty sure, I have to look this up, but I'm pretty sure there's one actor who was in the Ghost Recon Wildlands and Division 2 and a bunch of other games who's playing like 6 characters in that game. And they interact with each other, and I'm thinking, like, they're behind a door and you're like eavesdropping. It's like, who's talking to who? Like, if you don't have speaker names and subtitles, it seems like the one person talking to themselves and making voices. It is insane. Like a bunch of these characters, I'm 95% sure it's the same person doing a bunch of characters. Point is, it was like, early on I was like, I'm paying attention to try and get invested in these, and later on I'm like, just get me through the thing. I will say the actor behind Aiden is the only one who's like on a different plane of existence than the rest of the game. He's really good, and he really cares. Like I care because he cares, but like when he acts against other people, I'm like, oh, what the? Come on, just give me through. Just come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a fan of the narrative.
they're like, this character left this for you, but you're like, who the hell is this character? I thought that was just me. Is that because the characters are forgettable? Like you just see them in passing, like, but they're so important apparently. But you see them in passing, and they don't really reinforce like who they are or their significance in the time where they should be. I totally agree with you there. Definitely agree. The voice acting is questionable. Do you know what? Yeah, you know what I don't like. There's lines or like cheesy phrases that I believe should not be there when they speak. I feel like they're trying to like make the game serious, but they're also trying to like cater towards maybe like a younger audience. Or like some like pop culture like slang and all that. I'm like, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have added that, or like the Hollywood one liners. I'm like, whoa, that was out of place, like glaringly out of place as well. But you're right, big up Aiden's voice actor. And Lawan, the Lawan,
Yeah.
what's her name? Rosalie
Rosario Dawson.
Rosario Dawson.
That's the one. Yeah, big up her. I actually quite liked her voice acting.
I think it's a big thing throughout the whole game that the voice acting is a little bit uneven. Like there's weird stuff like I'm pretty sure a male child character in a flashback is just a grown woman talking in a grown woman's voice. Like, was that just me?
I was gonna spoil it, innit?
Whatever. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Anyway, and yeah, it's not like it's not Bart Simpson is voiced by a woman or whatever. But it's a perfectly normal thing to do in voice acting, but it just sounded.
But you're not supposed to hear it though.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the voice acting's pretty uneven. I mean, Rosario Dawson's okay. It's only about a 4 on the Lea Seydoux scale of terrible Hollywood game appearances. It doesn't quite sound like she's like reading it for the first time in a hotel bathroom, but it does have that vibe of I think it's probably the script where the phrases of the character that she's playing doesn't quite fit her way of talking, so she's slightly stumbling over the phrases a little bit. And I know that's pretty rich of me to say, stumbling over the words, but it does make it sound a little bit like she's reading aloud in English class. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, as I say, I quite liked it. I thought it was a perfectly serviceable kind of popcorn thing, but
I would actually say so far, for me at least, I remember more of the first game, and by the end of the first game, I was pretty pleased. This I would feel was a downgrade, despite the production value in general being higher. I'm not like the narrative is not doing anything for me, but yeah, which is. Yeah.
I think I'm keeping track of the overarching story, but like the micro stories and relationships between the characters, I'm like, what's going on here? There is one where I was like, okay, this is deep, and they should have stuck with this tone. I won't spoil it, but there is one. Also, like the pacing is very weird. I was gonna move on to the next segment of what I don't like. The pacing is very weird in this game. Like I said at the very start of this conversation, the first few hours are a bit like, whoa, I know you're setting everything up, but this just don't feel good, like, at all. But you'll get moments where it is actually really like your heart starts going. You're like, okay, yeah, I feel like I'm in danger right now. There's one bit in particular. I think James is going to mention it as well. It's a bit of a chase.
Yeah, that chase scene, like towards the end of the first act, like it's brilliant. Like really spooky.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that, and there's a lot of really effective set pieces in the game. And yeah, another thing that I didn't quite like as much was, as Sherif says, the choices are a little bit weird in that you're always kind of wondering whether is what I'm doing a result of what I've chosen up to this point, and you're always kind of worried, am I missing out on things that are this good in different things because I've chosen a different way. And something that I would say to people is that don't really sweat the story choices. They're just kind of connective tissue between the same main story missions, and you're
gonna get where you're going. It's just gonna be through a different path, but the game is gonna get to where it's going, basically. And I should also mention that if you play co-op and join a friend's game who's made a different choice in one of those, you get to see the effects of that, and you get mission rewards, and that you get to keep and take back to your own game if you play like these pivotal missions with them.
Anything else you didn't that is like you actually didn't like, not like no nitpick.
Well, yeah, that's a really great point. Obviously, it's not something I didn't like, but these are all little kind of nitpicks and foibles that we just kind of annoyed us while we were kind of playing, where we're trying to pick up things to meme on in a video, right?
Yeah.
It's there is a lot of this stuff in the game, but it focusing on it does undersell how much of a fun time and a good time it can be. You cannot go into it all thinking it's going to run really silky, it's going to be this really kind of polished experience, and you're just going to be, or it's going to be a transcendent, new, really fresh experience as well, because you're just going to get mad at all the janky things.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to say, as well as all of these nitpicks and all of these little things, that it is actually pretty fun.
Yeah, that big truth, man. Big truth. Even after everything we've said, like as I said at the very start, recommend it. Absolutely recommend it. I do anyway.
One thing I do not like that I want to mention, because it pissed me off when I was playing the game. It's a problem that's been in the first game as well, which is they overdo the bloom and lens flare to the point that at certain points in the day in the sun, you're looking directly at a thing and you can't see what you're looking at because the bloom and the hue is so overdone that it's blinding. And at night, all the UV lights, and if you look at like all the night city in the second map, it is so like the lens flare is almost like a column coming out of every light source, and it is so distracting and so terrible that there's no option to turn it off, unfortunately, and it makes the game otherwise looks decent, but it's just this sort of like it makes it look gaudy. It makes it look like someone who's trying to put like too much makeup on that. You're like, take it down a notch. Like you can look better than this. You don't need to like have everything looking that gaudy. And it really pissed me off. I will say, like the game overall looks like the image overall looks soft. The foliage and the way the rendering engine works is very similar to the first game. I thought it would be sharper than this in the second, but like a lot of times you look at a thing and you're like, you can't quite make out what you're looking at. Sometimes I would have to pull out my binoculars just to see what is this thing that I'm trying to like. Is this a climbing spot? Is this a zombie like crouching? What's happening here that I need to see? That stuff is really like there's no option to turn off, which is the other like disappointing thing. Like, come on, like, let me, or at least tune it down a little, because like, come on.
That's a good segue to performance. What system are you playing on, Sherif?
I was playing on PC. I have a 9700 Ki 7 and a 3080 Ti.
What sort of frames were you getting?
With everything maxed, but not ray tracing. Everything maxed in rasterized on DX12 at 1440p. I go very high 90s for the low, and up to like the 120s, 130s for the highs. It can drop pretty significantly, especially when a bunch of zombies on the screen. Like you can be like turning a corner and like, oh, I'm cruising at 115, and it's like, oh, it's like 94. Which again, high numbers, but the drop is noticeable. Ray tracing, I could not get like 40 FPS. I was like that opening segment of the thing, I was like, this is sub 40 FPS. I'm gonna go back to non-ray tracing, which I did. There is reconstruction, and the game has DLSS. We have not tried it with with the most recent NVIDIA driver. I hope it's better, but the one that shipped with the game in the version that we played makes the image even more soft. And I was not a fan of that. I turned it off. You're obviously going to get a benefit into performance, but I tried it with ray tracing as a sort of compromise to like, okay, I'm going to drop the resolution, but try to put the details at the max. Did not like the way it looks. So I was like, I went back to this. I just want to make this game sharp. Like I almost want to downsample from 4K, but performance generally decent. Just ray tracing is going to murder it.
Yeah, agreed. Turning ray tracing on, absolute no-go. Right now, we still don't know about the day one patch for the game, and there's a new driver out today. So today is the 2nd, and the game releases on the 4th. You played on PlayStation 5, James?
Yeah, PS5. It was pretty good. There were a few times where motion blur turned into a bit of slowdown, but all in all, it was more buggy things that I encountered rather than like proper kind of performance things, like you mentioned. I think obviously, as you say, these are from pre-release builds that do tend to get fixed most of the time. Obviously, we've been burned before on certain games, let's say, and when there's slowdown of that kind on PS5, you have to maybe think about what it's going to be like on PS4, a stock PS4, for instance. But obviously,
Jet engine.
we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. We have not had access to that. But if you are going to play on one of those older consoles, then perhaps seek out how it works on those consoles before you buy it.
Agreed. In my notes, I have mechanics and parkour. We did mention them briefly, but just to reinforce it again, the parkour is really good. Like so fun. It's so fun. It's very clear. You know exactly what you're doing. It feels intuitive, I think is the key word. What other mechanics across the whole game do you guys like?
I think everything feels good in it. Like the running, the movement, the traversal feels good. It's deep enough that once you unlock something, you're gonna mix it into your repertoire and then keep going with it. And the same thing goes for just the melee combat. It is varied enough that you can have a lot of fun, different fun with it, like throughout the game, and not just okay, I'm just smacking people. I get it. No, like you can have a thing. You can, like I said earlier, combo things into other things, which just feels amazing. But yeah, like mechanically, the game is a really good time. Just turn your brain off and just try to like have like a side objective going. It's so much fun jumping off roof, slamming down a thing, drop kicking, like pushing a zombie into these spikes. Oh my god, like the playground that is just fantastic.
James?
Completely echo that. There's not much more to say. That core loop is the real reason to play.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Closing notes. I will say yes. Definitely give Dying Light 2 a go, but going with caution. If you've read into the 500 hours thing, temper your expectations, because it is absolutely not 500 hours, but there is loads of stuff to do. Are those other things to do apart from the main campaign worthwhile, and are they do they have much variety? Not much, but because you go off to do those side quests, you get a chance to feel the core gameplay loop, or as Sherif said, of running around, drop kicking bosses off of skyscrapers and praying that you don't fall off with them, because that happened to me loads. And just parkouring around the place. That like sort of neutral game, I would call it, that neutral game is spot on, and it's really fun. If you're a person that only buys 1 or 2 games a year, Dying Light. And if you would you say Dying Light, it's like a it's quite good for casual play? Like you don't have to sit for 3 hours to feel like you got something done. I feel like you could come home from work, you got an hour, you can play, you can get some progress done. Because I like how to do the saves as well. The saves are quite good. Like you could have a power cut in the middle of a cutscene, and you can come back and you're just right back in that cutscene, like exact line, and you're just there, which I think is really cool. But yeah, that's what I've got to say about
Yeah,
that.
there are also difficulty options if you really want to chill. I found the middle difficulty to be fairly accessible. I feel like it was a little bit too easy, but I like my games a little spicy. But yeah, like if you want to just put it on like an easy difficulty and just like enjoy the slow motion and enjoy the heads coming off. Please don't arrest me for saying this. Just in the context of what we're saying and in the game, as they say.
Yeah, and you, James?
I think that more casual audience is definitely where this game's going to find its home, especially when you say if you're buying 1 or 2 games a year, this is a game that Techland has already committed to updating and supporting for, I think, 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So it's going to be something that's being updated with fresh stuff, or it's going to at least get Halloween events that you've seen 3 times for the foreseeable. So you're probably going to get a lot of value, not perhaps the same sort of value that they were pretending was in the game. But yeah, I just think about whether if this was badged as like a Walking Dead game, if they'd got that license or something, and it was just some kind of extended universe thing where they could build something like that, and that would suddenly make this game a real kind of mainstream big hitter. So if you're a big fan of those sort of grimdark post-apocalyptic TV shows, this will probably scratch a little bit of a similar itch for you.
Definitely. Right. That concludes this review discussion for Dying Light 2. Once again, it is out on February the 4th on all systems, including Nintendo Switch, but it's not out on February the 4th on Nintendo Switch. It's coming out a little bit later, and just know it's running on the cloud. It's running on the cloud. Because there's no way in hell a tablet could run this game. There's no way in hell. But my name is Dorrani. We have James and Sherif signing out as well. Say bye, guys.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And the full review, the more comprehensive review, is out on VG247.com. See you later.